Balancing these is not only testing my hand-eye coordination, but the additional thrill is that there is a cat right underneath the spile. So I better not drop them. I've been thinking recently that book content is something I would really like to do a lot more of. I don't know how you feel about that, but I think it's something that I would really like to do. So if you're up for it, I'm hoping there's going to be a lot more book chat around here, so stay tuned if that's up your street. And today I'm just going to talk you through the 10 that I've read recently and what I thought about them. And as always with these videos, there's absolutely no rhyme or reason or theme to what I like to read. This is a veritable smorgasbord of variety here. I am always on the hunt for recommendations that I need to get my teeth into, so please do let me know if you've got any must-reads at the moment, and if there's any particular book videos you would like to see. I'd love to hear that. So make yourself comfy. I've tried to go for as cozy a setup as physically possible. This golden lighting is really hitting the spot for me. So number 1 is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. A new Taylor Jenkins Reid novel, baby. We are blessed. Blessed be the fruit under his eye. This is the stuff I live for. Inject this into my veins immediately. Thank you very much. She tells the kind of vivid, character-led stories that I could only dream of being able to ever craft. Her writing is just exquisite to me. I live for her books. So here I am getting overly excited about another one of her stories. It's set in 80s Malibu, which instant cool points for having such an incredibly cool concept and setting. Like, it doesn't get much cooler than that. And the story is that the countdown is on to Nina Riva's legendary end of summer party. She and her siblings happen to be famous surfers. I told you it was cool. But incidentally, they also happen to be the children of the famous legendary singer Mick Riva, who, by the way, also features in Evelyn Hugo. I hadn't put 2 and 2 together there. My brain isn't that smart, but Adam is currently reading Evelyn Hugo and pointed it out and was like, oh wow, look. And I was like, oh my god, I love a cute little universe crossover. The only person who's not looking forward to Nina's party is Nina herself, because she's never done very well with coping with the limelight, and all of her siblings have each got a lot going on right now. I don't want to give too much away because I feel like this is a fresh book and I don't want to dish any spoilers out, but each of them are dealing with a lot right now. It's a night for the Riva family to confront all of their secrets, and it's a story about how one night can change everything. I just love an author who can tell a damn story and tell it really well and craft it almost like a painting. And this author, in every book I've read of hers, can tell it so well with so much charm. So as you can tell, the author, a fave of mine. Malibu Rising in itself, I don't think the story is anything like particularly super duper special and sparkling. Compared to her others, we've probably all read Daisy Jones and the Six, like her others, the plots are so special and unique. But I didn't think this one had that same like star quality to it. And I personally enjoyed the first half of this book, which like creates the backstory and gives loads of history to the characters. I enjoyed that half more than I enjoyed like the build up and the party itself. It did kind of lose a little bit of its magic for me there, so it's not making its way to like the top of my Taylor Jenkins Reid books ever. But I mean, that's like the tiniest amount of criticism ever. That's like saying, oh, this is not my favourite golden block of all of my golden blocks. So maybe not my favourite plot line ever, but the painting of the characters to the point where they literally feel real is quite amazing, and I related to all of them. So it did make me cry a couple of times, just a heads up for emotion. And it did also really make me want to be a surfer. So expect an impending career change. So next up we've got this little known debut by a relatively unknown author. I'm not sure you will have heard of her or anything. I'm not sure it's going to go down as one of the greats in history or anything like that, but oh, it's Wuthering Heights. Woo! Yeah, Wuthering Heights. The man, the myth, the legend. I read it. I don't know why I decided this. You know when you just make a decision for yourself and you're like, why do I do this to myself? For every sort of like 10 books or so that I've read, I'm trying to make at least one of them a classic of the ages, because I feel like I haven't read enough of them. It just feels like something I should do, and also I really enjoy self-sabotage. So here I am reading Wuthering Heights for fun. And yeah, this was my classic of choice this time. I decided to hang out with hunky Heathcliff for a few nights and see how we got on. Turns out we didn't get on that well. Not sure we'll be hanging out again. I probably don't really need to give you like a plot rundown of Wuthering Heights. Maybe I do, because honestly, do you know what? I went into this and I don't think I really knew the plot. I don't think I knew much about this book. It was weird though, because I was certain, like absolutely fixed on the fact that I had never read this before. But as soon as I got stuck into it, almost right from the get-go, there were passages in this book that I have definitely come across. So either I did do this in school at some point and I was just too busy thinking about McFly, or I've maybe just done like sporadic bits of this in analysis or whatever. And it got me thinking, like, how weird is that I don't think I've read the book, but I've come across like critics and commentary of it. And it almost has kind of like transcended being a book that you just sit and read. Like, I think I wanted the greatest romance story ever told, set out on the mystical moors, like a real passionate love affair between two legendary lovers, you know. I thought I was getting like romance. It is not that. Instead, I got some real nightmare-inducing scenes. The bit that really sticks in my mind is quite early on in the book, where there's like a hand at the window. Quite scary. I think the highlights of Wuthering Heights, the highlights of Wuthering Heights, it's quite a mouthful, were kind of like the depictions of Heathcliff. There's some really great passages about him, and he is a very fascinating character. I see why he's stuck around for quite some time. It's fascinating to me that Emily Bronte's two like iconic characters, who are basically like legendary literary characters, they're both quite frankly insane, completely self-absorbed, they're completely like torturous to one another. Their relationship is the epitome of a toxic relationship. I mean, we've all been there. We've all been in the Cathy and Heathcliff situation, am I right? So I thought it was really interesting how despite that, and despite how awful and horrible they are, they've really stood the test of time. I feel like I'm going to be annoying people saying this, because Wuthering Heights is like held very beloved by a lot of people, so I'm sorry if I'm insulting your favourite book right now. And I do understand that it's all like, oh, to be loved as fiercely as Cathy was loved by Heathcliff. Oh, swoon, I can only imagine. No thank you. No, no, no. He is extremely mean and crazy. Please leave my grave alone, sir. I did really like some of the descriptions of Heathcliff, and I liked the creepy moments. I kind of wish there was more creepiness in it, but I did not enjoy it. I'm sorry, Emily. And also, didn't know that Heathcliff was found on the streets of Liverpool. What an absolute Scouse icon. Number 3, this is Expectation by Anna Hope. Hold on to your feelings, ladies. Honestly, I'm looking at this one right now and I can't remember much about it other than the fact that I know I loved it, so that's a nice mixed review for you there. So the way I would describe this one is it's quite a slow-paced, quite gentle kind of story. It's the epitome of a slow burner, this one, and it's all about female friendships as you grow older and motherhood. I love a book about women in their 20s, mid-20s, late 20s, trying to get their shit together. That is right up my street, so I knew I was gonna really like this one. And it is about 3 girls who are all completely inseparable best friends. They all live in East London together, and they're just living that lovely, like, dream, kind of arty, romantic-y, revelry kind of life together. The kind of life that I thought I was going to lead when I moved to uni. But as well as that side, then we are also 10 years on and seeing how their lives have mapped out, how they all made different choices and how they all ended up in different situations, whether that's like a flop of a career or a failed marriage or trying for children, all these things that you suddenly kind of confront when you hit your 30s, and the results of all the decisions that you made during your 20s. The expectations, there you see the title, the expectations that you put on yourself with all those things, and the expectations that other people are also piling onto you. I think the real magic of this book came to me because I read it at exactly the right time. I think I was reading this like as I crossed over, as I hit my 30th birthday, as I crossed over into the next life. The plot is almost kind of like a sideline for me with this book. The most important thing for me with this was the way this book made me feel, which probably sounds really weird, but honestly, this was an experience. Every single page I was just constantly thinking of my friends and how we all kind of came from the same starting point, but how all of our paths have been so completely different, and how we've all taken different turns in our lives, and how we've all been through really difficult things. I think the complexity of like long-lasting female friendship is one of the most beautiful things that you can experience. And I think this book really kind of weaves that together very nicely. I did read this during lockdown, so I think it was just incredibly poignant, considering I hadn't seen my friends for a really long time. And also the fact that it was the right age and so relevant to me and stuff. I think I just hit on a sweet spot with this book. And it just sounds so weird, honestly. I don't know how to explain it, but a few people also said the same when I was talking about this on Instagram. Like, it really brought out this kind of this really like visceral sadness in me. I'm really selling this very well. Like, it was painful in the same way that nostalgia is difficult and painful, but also very sweet. It was that exact same feeling. And there's not a lot of things that have evoked that emotion in me. One of the other things that gave me almost exactly the same feeling is the film Booksmart. If you've ever seen that, you might know what I'm talking about. It just made me really long for my friends, like a real longing for my friends. So overall, I would say don't read this book during a global lockdown, because it will make you very aware of the fact that you haven't seen your friends for about 10,000 years, and you feel like you will simply perish if you don't see them soon. Number 4, this one, Such a Fun Age by, I always get it mixed up. I always think it's Riley Keed, but it's Kiley Reid. Whew, this one was wild. This was a wild ride. This was not what I was expecting at all after I read the blurb. It really took me by surprise. So I think Such a Fun Age is basically like one of the must reads of 2021, maybe even 2020. I'm so behind on all of these things. So it was really high on my list of to be read. I was really excited to get stuck into it, and it's also a debut novel. I mean, can we just imagine writing a debut novel and this is what comes out. The main character we meet is Amira. She is a young babysitter. She's black, and one night she takes the kid that she's looking after to the supermarket, and the security confront her because they think that she has kidnapped the little girl. There's a big confrontation. It gets filmed by a bystander. The whole incident is obviously super humiliating for Amira, and Alex Chamberlain, who is the woman that she works for, vows that she is going to make everything better for Amira. She's going to fix everything. Alex, Amira's employer, she's a businesswoman, she's super rich, she's super successful, she's white, and Amira is a bit wary of why Alex is so determined to fix this situation and make everything better in Amira's life. She's being overly nice. And then someone from Alex's past pops up when the video of Amira's confrontation goes viral online. And that's when everything really kicks off. So what I loved about this book, and what I think is so clever about it, is that obviously the subject matter of this is heavy. There's obviously a lot of talk and themes of race and privilege and the realities of that woven through this story, and yet it doesn't feel like a heavy read. The story is almost like so breezy and so like casually told. So it's a good reminder of how that stuff does go by so casually, like in domestic life, in day-to-day domestic normal life. My main take for this story is that Alex is one of the most uncomfortable characters I have ever read, and it brings up this whole idea of like offering to protect someone or offering to help someone, but the conditions of that help all being on your own terms and having control of that person in order to fix them how you deem suitable. And this idea that like you're helping them, but you're in control of them and you're deciding how they need to be saved from this life that they lead, that is really like quite sinister to me. And I literally spent, I mean, how many pages are there in this book? I literally spent 300 pages cringing at this woman, so it was quite a relief to get to the end. I did think the ending felt a little bit rushed, and I almost wanted like more of a crescendo and like more of a big thing to happen at the end. I wanted like more of a comeuppance for Alex and more of a triumph for Emira. I did kind of want to enjoy that a little bit more, but then I suppose it would probably lose its realism a little bit. Number 5, while I just wipe the dust off of this, I read this a while ago and it hasn't got a dust jacket on it, so it's it looks like an ancient tale that I would be like it's actually A Slow Fire Burning by Paula Hawkins. I was lucky enough to be sent an early copy of this a few months ago, but it is out very soon. It is out on the 31st of August, so by the time you watch this, it's not long to go. A Slow Fire Burning by Paula Hawkins, who is of course the author of The Girl on the Train, which I'm sure you are familiar with. You've probably either read it or seen the film, and she is also the author of another one which I think is called Still Waters, which I did read, but I didn't really like very much. It's very, very slow. But I had really high hopes for this because it's more back towards the Girl on the Train style of story. It's very like twisty, twisty, thriller, somebody's died, whoa, didn't see that one coming. Also, orange edges. I never know what I think about sprayed edges. I hate when they like stick together, but it is also really satisfying to separate them. Anyway, the premise of this one is that a man is found murdered on a houseboat in London, and that brings into the limelight 3 separate women who are all linked to him in one way or another. There's Laura, who is a woman who had a one-night stand with him, Cara, who is his aunt, who is already in mourning for another loss, and then there is Miriam, who is like the nosy neighbour, a little bit strange. They're all connected somehow to this mystery murder, but they each also have something going on, which has left a little bit of like resentment bubbling under the surface. So it's all about like how far each of them might go to get revenge on their own situation and how all of it links together like a puzzle. Like Girl on the Train, this is a really clever story, but I would say it is a little bit tricky to follow. You sort of like get into the flow of it and you find your way through, but especially at the beginning, it's quite tricky because there are just so many characters, like so many characters. I handed this over to Adam to read after I'd finished with it because I really enjoyed it, and he just could not get into it because of like how big the cast is. Is it a cast? The narrative chops and changes between all of those different people's points of view, so it is a little bit of a meandering, like you kind of have to check back to remember names and stuff. I always quite like playing the long game of seeing how narratives all fit together, but this is a particularly complicated example of like having to keep track of everybody's goings on. Oh, my favourite part of it, which I thought was super clever, was that there's like a book within the story. One of the characters who's involved in everything is writing a book, and his book is in this book, which I just thought was pretty amazing, and it's like so deftly woven into the murder story. I've never seen that before, and I just thought that was really clever. Like, not only have you written this book, but there is also another book within this book. So yeah, it takes a bit of brain power to keep on top of it all, but I thought it was really well written and it's a clever little thriller, and I thought it would make a really good BBC adaptation. So that will kind of give you the kind of vibe. Number 6, this is Luster by Raven Leilani. So I made a note of this one ages ago and just hadn't got around to reading it. I've got a friend, my friend Helen, she works at Waterstones, so she's always like really on the ball of like the must-read stuff. She always has really good book recommendations, and she suggested this to me ages ago. This is actually her copy. I've just remembered. I need to give this back to her. I have had this for so long, sorry Helen. And since she recommended that, I suddenly saw it everywhere. So I finally got around to it, and I'm very glad I did. I'm very glad that this made its way to the top of my TBR pile because it was just something a bit different for me, and I really, really enjoyed it. I would say it definitely lives up to this like big hype that it's got around it. I always love a book about a messy character. They're just so much more interesting when their life is a bit of a mess. So this is one that ticks that box and then some. There's messy and then there's this character. It is about a girl in her early 20s. She is black and she's an artist and she's an orphan and she hasn't really got any friends. She's having an affair with this like older middle-aged white guy. I guess they probably have like a 20-year age gap or something. And when she loses her job, she moves in with him, and also his wife, who he's in like an open marriage with. And that makes it sound like really shocking, and that's going to be like the main big thing of the story. I would say there's actually a lot more to it than just like a girl in her 20s living with an open marriage. I'd say there's a lot more to this book than just that like shocking plotline. The main girl is Edie, and she's basically just trying to like navigate herself as a human being and trying to understand herself and find herself. At times it's quite sad. Like as a character, it really, the main thing that I took from her is that she just felt so lonely to me, and that almost makes it like a little bit of a sad read. It's weird because when you kind of like hear that blurb and when I kind of try and explain that, it almost sounds like it's going to be like a coming of age kind of story and almost have like a warm kind of like almost like a light-hearted vibe to it, and it's not that at all. The way it's written is very kind of cold and detached, and it just adds to this real kind of feeling of like frantic messiness. It really does have this like feeling of like stressfulness to it. It's about this woman who's completely exposed, like no holds barred, showing like all the ugliness that can come with trying to figure out yourself and make your way through life. Not to like keep going on about the writing and stuff, but sometimes the sentences just like run and run and run, and they almost kind of like flow into one another, and that just makes it feel so honest and real and raw and complicated. And I say like it's messy, but it's really finely tuned messy, if that makes any sense. So I would say Luster is definitely very unique. I think it's a bit of a love-hate kind of read, but I definitely loved it. I found it really compelling and addictive to read. I maybe didn't love like the bones of the story itself, like the plot line, but the writing is what like kept me going to the end. It really packs quite a powerful punch, I would say, and I'm looking forward to reading more by this author. Right, number 7. I don't even really want to talk about this one. It's called Putney. First things first, this one comes from me with a large trigger warning of child grooming, sexual abuse, child abuse. Like, it's not a pleasant read at all. It is deeply uncomfortable and dark. I don't really know why I read this, but here we are. This story is half set in the 70s in London, and we meet this composer called Ralph, who is working with a novelist called Ed Greensley to bring one of his stories to like a musical stage. They're working together. So Ralph is welcomed into the Greensley home, which is very much of the time. It's very like bohemian, very relaxed, no kind of rules to be seen. Parenting leaves a lot to be desired. So Ralph is introduced to Ed's family, and that includes his 9-year-old daughter Daphne, who very promptly and swiftly becomes Ralph's muse. Yeah, completely showers and overwhelms her with gifts and affection, like right from the get-go, and it doesn't take long for 9-year-old Daphne to be swept up in all this attention. And Daphne's best friend Jane is the only one who knows what's really going on between the two of them behind closed doors. So the story then alternates between that time period to modern day Daphne, who's now in her 40s, and she's back in London after having led a really tumultuous life. But she's now got her own daughter who's like a young teenager, and she's trying to set up like a stable home to raise her daughter in. And as part of that, she gets back in touch with her old friend Jane, and that then starts to bring up a lot of old memories and a lot of conversations about the past, and Daphne is suddenly kind of confronted with coming to terms with what was really going on. As you can probably imagine, after all that, it's a very difficult story to digest, and it's one of those books that I definitely didn't enjoy this because it's just so infuriating and frustrating, and of course it is deeply uncomfortable, but the way it is written, this author is amazing. It's so compelling to read, the way that you get the story from 3 different perspectives. So you get the story from the abuser, the victim, and the witness, and how all of that kind of clashes or fits together. At times it is like stomach turning, but the satisfaction as a reader comes from like the later half of the book and like the modern bit where Daphne is having this realization. It's obviously heartbreaking, but it's quite rewarding to like go through that with a character. And and have this kind of epiphany. It's super frustrating and you're on a knife edge for a lot of it, but it's a great, compelling read if you can stomach it. And it obviously evokes a lot of strong emotion. Number 8, They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. Ah, so heartwarming, so uplifting. What a lovely title, so much wonderful joy. If there was ever a title that told you what was waiting around the corner, do I even need to tell you that this will probably make you cry? Is set in like a dystopian world where this thing called Deathcast exists. It's a system that calls to let you know that within the next 24 hours you are going to die. So it lets you know that you are living your last day on this earth. And one day 2 boys called Mateo and Rufus both get the call, and it's not good news. At the risk of sounding like Simon Cowell, it's not good news, I'm afraid. Mateo and Rufus have never met, they are total strangers, but they both realise that they would like a friend to spend their last day on Earth with. And there's an app for that. It's called Last Friend, to pair you with someone to spend your last day with. And they both pair up. And I will continue this in a second because there's an enormous wasp in the room. Okay, wasp thwarted. Where was I? So Rufus and Mateo pair up for one last adventure together and to live a whole lifetime of memories in one day. Yeah, I know, I told you it was a jolly one. But I just think it's such a cool and fascinating, unique concept for a book. You could just tell that from so many different perspectives. There could be a whole library. The main lads as well that the story is about are a gay Puerto Rican guy and a bisexual Cuban guy. And I just thought that was some really nice like diversity representation to see. I thought he wrote both the main characters really realistically and just like normally rather than, you know, overblown and overdramatic. Like they just seem very real. I loved them both. They are wonderful characters and really well written, but Mateo in particular is just like the cutest little bean, and I just wanted to wrap him up in a blanket and protect him at all costs. And it's just so clever as well because literally up until like the very final moment, like I was reading the words on the page as it was happening and I was like, well, they're not actually gonna die. Like, they're not actually gonna die. This isn't actually gonna happen. You know what's gonna happen. And yet, because the characters are so lovable and like you connect with them so well, you're just in complete denial that this is actually gonna happen. It did have like a real genuine feeling to it, and I thought it was a really interesting mix of like tenderness and vulnerability and taking quite a lot of comfort from that and that like genuine connection that people can find. And also, like, that's mixed with the saddest possible scenario. It's this great mix of total sadness and real loveliness. And that made it a really great read. I think everyone who read this book would experience it differently depending on like your life experiences and how you feel about death. I would say just buckle up if you're going to read this one. I mean, the dedication literally says, for those who need a reminder to make every day count. So good luck with this one. Number 9, this is Reputation by Lex Croucher. As soon as it was announced that Lex had written a book, this went straight to the top of my very excited to read these books list, which is not an official list, but maybe it should be on a scroll. You are probably familiar with Lex, but if you are not, then that probably means that you spent your youth in the outside world rather than wishing that you were friends with people on the internet. One of my absolute favourite internet people that there ever was sang a song about dungarees, made a lot of very relatable YouTube content, knew very confidently that it was going to be great, and spoiler alert, it was indeed great. First of all, I just need to talk about this cover because it's made me realise how much I love books that have illustrations of the characters on them. You don't see that very often anymore. I feel like that's quite old school, but it's something that I would like to see more of, please. Anyway, the words within the cover. Reputation is a really... The word I have used for this book so many times is fun. Like, Reputation is a really fun, light-hearted, joyful, Regency period rom-com, and it tells what might have been like the more raucous, debauched side of Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen kind of life. I've seen it described as Pride and Prejudice / Mean Girls, and on the cover it says Bridgerton / Fleabag, which is a delicious mixture of things. This is the story of Georgiana, who is sent to live with her aunt and uncle for what she thinks is going to be an extremely dull summer. But then at a ball she meets the enigmatic and very exciting Frances, who's kind of like the Regina George of the Regency period world. She's the head of the local social scene, and Georgiana is suddenly sucked into this whirlwind of chaos. High society parties, drinking, drugs, handsome men in the shadows, and it's a great time. Or is it? I would say Reputation is one that you will love if you are here for a good time. If you're here for a fun book full of melodramatic, like character-based great storytelling. Every single character in this book is so well written and so well formed. There's so much personality to this story. The humour was a real highlight for me. Every single character is so full of humour, and I just loved it. I devoured this book. The dialogue is absolutely hilarious, which is kind of what I was hoping for from this book, and the relationships between the characters really spark. I really loved like the exploring of the friendship between Georgiana and Frances. That was what I found the most interesting about this story, was the friendship dynamic. I did really like the romance part of this as well, but to me the interesting like compelling part of the story was the friendship, because they're all quite complex and there's so much kind of like politics involved, and they're real kind of like fine line between love and hate. It's just really fun and so joyful and like a delight to read. I looked forward to this all day. I looked forward to getting into bed to read more of this. Also, I'm gonna need this to be made into a film. Please, Netflix. Thank you. And last but not least, we made it. Number 10. Blood Orange by Harriet Tyce. I have absolutely no recollection of why I bought this book. I think I must have seen it on somebody's Instagram, because that is literally where all my money goes. I see someone else reading a book and I'm like a sponge. Like I just absorb that book and I need to read it instantly. I just have absolutely no control when it comes to paperbacks. It's a real problem. Thriller, crimey, murdery type tale, and I haven't read anything like this for ages. I went through a phase where these type of books were literally all I read, and I think I just hit my capacity for bad husbands and strange mysterious demises, but luckily I seem to have found a love for both of those things again. So Blood Orange is about Alison, who is, I don't know what the proper job title is, like a criminal defense lawyer, barrister type person. Anyway, on the surface it looks as though she's got the perfect life, but in reality, as a reader, we know that she is coming dangerously close to teetering over the edge and everything falling apart. She drinks too much, she works too much, she's having a crazy passionate affair with one of her colleagues. She's just doing all of the bad things kind of completely out of control. But then she lands her first big murder case that she's in charge of. She's representing a woman who is accused of killing her husband, but Alison thinks that there is more to the story than meets the eye. But that is all happening at the same time as it becoming very clear that somebody knows about the affair that she's having with her colleague. So there's a lot going on. And by the time I'd reached the end of this book, it felt like if I was going to write a tick list of everything that can possibly happen within a thriller story, if you name like all the classic plot lines and plot twists that happen in one of these books, this I think had ticked off every single one. It is full of twists and turns, and it is an extremely fast-paced story. Very dark and pretty gritty, and as I said, pretty much everything that can happen possibly happens, and I kept getting surprised by the latest turn of events that seem to happen to this woman. It's a bit of a theme with books like this, that every single character is very unlikable, and it's not the kind of story where you kind of connect and relate. They're just kind of like generally quite awful, selfish people, because that's what brings the drama. So I would say the tone and like the voice of the characters weren't really my cup of tea, but the plot was really good because it was just constantly like, now we're going here, oh now this has happened. It was a really like well written, like well mapped story, which really kept me guessing and kept me on my toes, and I think that is the sign of a good thriller. That's what you're looking for from a thriller. You don't want to have like predicted what's happened halfway through. So that is everything that I have been reading recently. I hope you enjoyed that. If I was going to do like a little, maybe like a top 3 from all that lot that I would really recommend, I would say Malibu Rising for really beautiful, brilliant storytelling. I would say Expectation for the feels. It's such a fun age for a very clever read. I'm gonna cheat and have a top 4 because I also want to put Reputation in there because it was just so fun to read. I would love to hear if you've read any of these and what you thought about them, whether you agree or disagree with what I thought, and I really hope you enjoyed this one. There's a little bit of coffee left, but I've talked so much that it's literally going to be stone cold now, so I'm going to do myself a favour. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope I've kept you company. Take care, and I will see you very soon with another video.